The Silent Hill franchise is renowned for its deep psychological stories, haunting and unique atmosphere, and its unforgettable characters. These games push the boundaries for what a video game narrative can be, and the series has had its fair share of ups and downs over the years. There was the original 4 games made by Team Silent. Then there was the 4 mainline games made by various other developers in the West, along with some spin-off titles, which were all less well received compared to those original games. Next, the series would go on hiatus for close to a decade, which we now come to the revival of Silent Hill, as we currently have seen 4 projects released, to a mostly positive note, I would say. And as the franchise seems to be not slowing down anytime soon, there is actually a part to this franchise's legacy that I didn't mention there, and that many of you may not know about. When Konami axed Team Silent and tried to bring Silent Hill to a more mainstream audience, they also sought to bring Silent Hill from a purely home console experience. And aside from some brief attempts at the handheld games market, Konami had many Silent Hill mobile games developed. The goal here seemed to be bringing Silent Hill to a more casual global market, as well as allowing those who don't have home consoles an opportunity to have Silent Hill experiences. I believe this part of Silent Hill's history to be just so fascinating, and as a whole, it's not very well documented. As a huge fan of this series, I find these games just super odd and unique. So for you today, I have compiled and researched all of these games and placed them into 3 separate categories: Reimaginings, standalone spin-offs, and ports. These 3 categories of releases really sums up the type of Silent Hill games Konami wanted on mobile platforms, such as a reimagining of their big home console games, standalone spin-offs with unique narratives exclusive to mobile platforms, and even ports of normal releases. I'll be examining each of these game types and the games themselves, analysing the highs and lows of Konami's many mobile releases, and this can hopefully be an interesting history lesson for fans of the Silent Hill series. Let me now bring you on a journey through what I believe to be one of the most unknown corners in Silent Hill's history, starting where it all began with the first mobile game, Silent Hill Mobile DX, a reimagining of the original 1999 classic. The first Silent Hill mobile game, titled Silent Hill Mobile DX, or sometimes just called Silent Hill, was released exclusively in Japan in July of 2006. As was common for mobile games at the time, it could only be downloaded via certain mobile phone services. In Silent Hill DX's case, it was the iMode internet provider. The game could only be accessed over the Konami Net DX page, a web page in the early 2000s that allowed users to download Konami mobile games for a fee of 315 yen a month. This rather unheard of release was a simple reimagining of the original Silent Hill from 1999. Unlike the incredible survival horror classic, this game was a visual novel style retelling of that game's story, which released alongside the first Silent Hill movie adaptation. For 2006, a full port of a PS1 game on mobile was pretty impossible, thus they opted to try bring the story of that game to mobile devices, while gameplay and graphics was simplified. Visually, you will be mostly looking at still images and text. The gameplay itself is a point-and-click system, which allows you to interact with your items, map and environment, and it tries to honour the same gameplay flow of the original game as best as it can, with the player exploring the environment, looking for puzzle items, supplies, and fighting enemies. The game features 3 chapters, those being Midwich Elementary School, Alchemilla Hospital, and Nowhere. All of the game's original endings are intact here, including the UFO ending. For the game's combat, it is done in a turn-based system, with you being able to use melee weapons or guns, although ammo is scarce. The radio mechanic is also seen here, but in a new way. A small green bar on the screen will act as the radio. It will increase as you move around the environment. When it's full, a random battle will start. So with random encounters and a turn-based combat system, in a way, Silent Hill DX is an RPG. Nearly all of the original game's enemies are seen here, such as the Puppet Nurse, Mumblers, and all the truly horrifying creatures you know and love from SH1. The enemies here are presented as just their PS1 models plastered on screen, which I find pretty funny. While this game is extremely limited, I found its sound design to be commendable at least, as it really tried to capture the same atmosphere as the game. Its ambient music was also pretty good for a mobile game in 2006. It even manages to have a version of the game's iconic intro, with a similar background track and matching still images. As for playing the game today, the only version of it somewhat circulating online, as you can see, is in Chinese. I have no idea where the original Japanese version has gone, and there is currently no English translation, although I do believe there was a fan translation in the works at this stage. For what it is, Silent Hill DX is at least a cool little nugget of Silent Hill history. It tried to be an adaptation of the original Silent Hill on the go, which is commendable, and for how simple nearly all of its gameplay had to be to work, I don't fault it. But if you want to experience Silent Hill 1, this definitely isn't the best way to do that, if you can even find a way to play this game, that is. While Silent Hill DX would be the only reimagining released on mobile, this next category of entry would see 4 different games released, those being standalone spin-offs. Silent Hill Orphan would start these types of releases. It launched in late 2007 in both Europe and Japan, and it would later find North American fans in the back half of 2008, making this the first globally available Silent Hill mobile game. Much like Silent Hill DX, this game is sometimes also called Silent Hill Mobile. However, I'll stick with Orphan for now. SH Orphan takes a lot of design cues from SHDX, as this is also a first-person point-and-click game. However, as this is a standalone spin-off, we get to see a completely unique narrative and set of characters not seen in any main game. The game's story itself is centered around the abandoned Shepherd Orphanage in Silent Hill. 30 years ago, almost all the children of the orphanage were murdered, except for 3, Ben, Moon, and Karen. We will play as each of these characters over the course of the game's 3 chapters, with each character interlocking with each other as they shed new light on that tragic night 30 years ago. Exploring the orphanage's eerie halls, it's surprising just how well the devs were able to bring that Silent Hill sense of dread to a mobile game. Going room to room and door to door through the orphanage felt very like the classic Silent Hill gameplay loop. Additionally, finding key items and scanning your surroundings was also very fun. And the puzzles were those same kind of common sense style of puzzles the early games in the series liked so much. As well as those, there was some pretty cryptic riddles for players to figure out. After exploring for a while, eventually we can find the Halo of the Sun icon, which when interacted with, transports us to the otherworld version of the orphanage. Which again, I'm surprised with how well the devs were able to nail the otherworld type design here. Some of the things you see in the environment don't make sense, and it all feels generally really hostile, as does the atmosphere, which really makes it feel like the otherworld. I also really enjoyed the game's art style. I love this aesthetic, although I would say its colour palette has this samey feeling to it, as most areas seen here have this warm beige sort of colour to them. However, this may be just a limitation of the hardware. Within the otherworld, we get our first taste of combat, and it's a bit more involved than Silent Hill DX. Here, whenever an enemy catches you by surprise, you can use a handgun to take them out. You need to drag the on-screen cursor over the enemy and blast them at the right time. It's pretty simple, however you feel more involved as you're actively pulling the trigger, unlike the turn-based gameplay of DX. As cool as it is to explore the otherworld, we are able to actually go between it and the real world at any time, which is needed to solve some puzzles. After finishing up the first chapter as Ben, which ends on a pretty shocking moment, we then play as Moon, as she then begins to go through the orphanage. Within Moon's story, we see some of the more psychological, mental health related elements that Silent Hill likes to explore, such as Moon having serious depression, which would then result in her trying to harm herself and commit suicide. Fed up with this, Moon's parents sent her to the orphanage all those years ago. As Moon travels through the orphanage now, she has tested many times with temptations of harming herself. She hears voices telling her to do it, and at a stage, she's even given a pair of scissors. However, she perseveres and doesn't pay those thoughts any mind. Moon's chapter also ends on a pretty big moment. With now the third and final act of the game, we follow Karen. Karen's chapter starts with her trapped within the orphanage, as she relies on Ben from the first chapter to free her. When he does, we learn that Karen had a sister who passed away years ago. Her sister's name is Alyssa. While it isn't said to be Alyssa Gillespie, I guess this is a spin-off game, so it could be a different person. But I mean, choosing a powerful ghost girl in your Silent Hill game to be called Alyssa, that can't be a coincidence. The game has a pretty shocking reveal in true Silent Hill fashion within its final act, and the final confrontation between Karen and her sister Alyssa lets us learn who killed everyone in the orphanage and why. After a simple enemy fight, Karen beats Alyssa, and the game ends with a to be continued message. Which is where I should mention that Silent Hill Orphan got not just a sequel game, but it got 2 sequels, spawning a whole trilogy of games. Before I get into the next game, circling back to this one, I actually really enjoyed this game for what it is. I found its narrative to be surprisingly intriguing. Thematically, it's on point for the Silent Hill series, and all 3 of the characters' chapters really link together nicely. I didn't go too into detail on the game's exact plot twists, as I would actually encourage you to try give this game a go for yourselves. While it is a little tricky to find a version of this game, it isn't impossible. Closing out Silent Hill Orphan, let me show you what came next. Released in just under a year after the first game, Silent Hill Mobile 2 will continue on the story from the original game. This time, we get to play as two new characters, Lucas and Vincent, which, no, it couldn't be that Vincent, could it? Both of these characters are called to a hospital within Silent Hill, most likely Brookhaven Hospital, although it isn't named specifically. We first play as Lucas, a man who can't remember his name and doesn't understand what is going on. This story of forgotten memories is a little played out in my opinion, however it allows this game's story to tie into the orphanage from the first game with a plot twist later on. Gameplay itself is almost identical to the first game, with all of the same controls and systems staying there, as you will use a point and click system to navigate the hospital, all while examining the environment and looking for key items to progress. Now the art style I found to be much improved over the first game. The hospital's use of greys, whites and shades of black gave it this cold, sterile feeling that felt very unnerving. Graphics also feel much improved, with some areas we explore looking almost like real life photos just scanned into the game. We can once again go into the other world via a red symbol on the wall, which transforms the dull, cold hospital into a nightmarish version, with hues of red seeping down its halls and walls. Within the other world, we see a similar combat system to the first game. However, this time, there is a better sense of rhythm to the combat, as these cursors appear over enemies. Striking right when the cursor turns red indicates you hit a vulnerable area. As Lucas goes through the hospital, he is guided by Karen from the first game, as she seems to be able to communicate with Lucas through supernatural abilities. Lucas's chapter as a whole, I do enjoy, however the whole plot point of him forgetting literally everything just so we can have another shock twist is a bit boring in my opinion. His chapter concludes with him confronting Karen, in a similar way to how Karen initially confronts her sister to close off the original game. It's revealed that a plagued with guilt Karen has tried to revive all of the deceased children from the orphanage using some witchcraft. And wouldn't you know it, but Lucas was one of the children killed there. So it's honestly up in the air if Lucas is even real. Feeling hurt and betrayed, Lucas kills Karen with a pipe, which abruptly then cuts to the next chapter. Ending Lucas's chapter, we now swap to Vincent. Again, much like Alyssa from the first game, this must be a coincidence, as this doesn't seem to be the same Vincent seen in Silent Hill 3. Vincent is also at the hospital for unknown reasons, and Vincent's sections are rather repetitive, as there isn't much interconnectivity between his chapter and Lucas's, aside from Vincent finding the dead body of Karen. Again, the gameplay doesn't change between chapters. We explore the environment looking for clues and puzzle items to move forward. Occasionally, we will then go into the other world, which brings more tension, and this chapter's only combat encounter, as we fight this disgusting, fleshy face inside of a wall. Vincent's chapter feels the weakest by far, as his story is pretty vague. The game concludes with a strange voice asking Vincent if he really thought he could get away with all that. This unnerving, guilty message confuses Vincent as it cuts to a to be continued screen, which will set up the third and final game of the trilogy. Silent Hill Orphan 2 overall is a good successor to the original. However, I think where it does improve with its visuals and environments, it lacks the same strong narrative that the first game had. Both Lucas and Vincent's stories aren't half as interesting as the original trio, and the way the narrative was tied back to the original game felt a little forced in my opinion. And while I did talk about its major plot twist here, I sorta had to, otherwise I wouldn't be able to tell you anything about its narrative. There is a good amount of details I still left out, so I do recommend you check this game out, but only if you enjoyed the first game. Now, let me move on to the third and final entry of the trilogy. The conclusion to the Orphanage trilogy, Silent Hill Orphan 3 or Silent Hill Mobile 3, took a little longer to release compared to its prequel. Announced in 2009, the game would finally launch a year later, making it 2 years since the second game had released. This conclusion to the trilogy swapped hands, as this game was developed by Playsoft, where both of the prior games were developed by Game Federation Studios, and you can kinda get that feeling here. And although we see the same point and click gameplay as prior entries, it does overall feel and look slightly different. Combat has also seen some changes. Instead of the cursor glowing red when it's the best time to shoot, instead 2 different cursors will come from left and right sides of the enemy. Timing it just right and shooting when they line up deals massive damage. The game's story picks right up where we left off as we continue playing as Vincent. This time, he explores a mansion that seemed to be the original home of both Karen and Alyssa. The mansion is fun to explore and has some pretty great atmosphere and some very disturbing rooms you can explore. Visually, it looks exactly like a Silent Hill location you would explore in the main games. Oddly enough, we can actually encounter enemies within the real world, which is showing that Karen and Alyssa are getting stronger. Thinking back to the second game, it pretty much ended with an admission of guilt that Vincent had done something in his past that was awful, We learn here that he set fire to this mansion while both of the sisters were inside. Thus, Vincent is blamed by Karen for all of the events that followed after the fire, such as the orphanage massacre and even the events of the past 2 games. Vincent's first chapter ends with this horrifying revelation, and we pick up with our new playable protagonist. Emily is pretty much a throwaway character. She awakes in the otherworld version of the mansion with no idea of what's going on. She hears a voice guiding her to go save someone. Confused on what to do, Emily listens to the voice's commands. The voice asks her to defeat all of the enemies in the mansion in order to return to her world. So you will be mostly just retreading through the mansion, killing monsters, and briefly searching rooms. But as is common with this trilogy of games, the backtracking is very repetitive. After finally defeating all of the enemies, Emily comes back to the real world and finds a half-dead Vincent, who was attacked and left to die by Karen at the end of the game's first chapter. Alyssa tells Emily that this is the person she must save, and in order to save him, Emily must kill herself using a holy blade. Of course, initially, Emily rejects that idea, but she is convinced by Alyssa to go through with it, and thus, she takes a look at the carefully carved blade and ends her life, which kicks off the game's final chapter. Vincent awakes now. Emily's sacrifice was a success, as he has regained his strength. Alyssa gets Vincent to follow her as she leads him in the facing off against the horrifying version of Karen. The final fight itself is as crazy as a boss can be within this combat style, and finally killing off this horrifying creature, we see that Alyssa has strung Vincent all along this whole time. Alyssa needed all of the children from the orphanage to be killed, along with her sister. When she led Lucas to kill Karen in the last game, she thought that that was it, but that creature we just faced was another side of Karen. Thus, this game's whole point was Alyssa stringing Vincent along to kill Karen. Emilia herself was actually a child of the orphanage. However, the day of the massacre, she was absent with a sickness, so she needed to die also. As this revelation is revealed to us, Vincent begins to suffer a heart attack, and with his use to Alyssa coming to an end, she lets him suffer as his heart gives out, leaving the only witness of everything to die on the floor. The narrative ends with the evil side of Alyssa, Karen, and Vincent in general all going to hell due to being responsible for the massacre in the orphanage in some way or another, which concludes the entire trilogy. And it's kind of a bittersweet ending in my opinion. The ending itself is very abrupt, and it didn't feel like this great big trilogy payoff I would normally expect. However, this is a mobile game trilogy that, despite taking 3 years to fully release and swapping its developers, it somehow retained a consistent narrative and cast of characters throughout. I feel like the Orphan trilogy as a whole is a rather underlooked set of games. Yes, they are rather short, with simple point and click gameplay. However, I feel like that original game specifically has a really strong narrative that fits with the series' overall theme and style of storytelling. And for mobile games in the late 2000s, they definitely gave you a lot of the same feelings as playing any home console Silent Hill game. While I feel the second and third game started to fall off in terms of its story, they visually looked great, and I'm just so surprised that there was a full trilogy of Silent Hill games I never knew about. Now, these 3 games aren't the only standalone spin-off games released. Oh no, there would be one final game that Konami themselves would develop and publish, launching around the same time as Silent Hill Orphan 2. Silent Hill The Escape would release in both Japan and North America in 2008. It released for both the iPhone and iPod Touch, and he used this newfound technology to give us some pretty unique gameplay for the series. Silent Hill The Escape is a fun mobile game first, and Silent Hill game second. Konami tried to do something very different with this release compared to the last few. Silent Hill The Escape is a first-person dungeon crawler of sorts. Players go through stage after stage, fighting some recognizable and Silent Hill-esque creatures, all while they search for a key to open the door to go to the next stage. Its combat is almost the whole point of the game. Aiming is done via the use of the iPhone's gyroscope. Enemies have weak points that the players can target in order to deal more damage, and there is a decent variety of creatures for us to fight. There is the iconic bubblehead nurse, who will slowly limp towards you, but can be put down with a single shot to their head. You can also find these little flying creatures that will rapidly jitter across the screen, making them hard to hit, although they are very weak. There's also these ceiling enemies that will force the players to tilt their phone upwards, a haunted wheelchair, which is a funny addition since it's just, a wheelchair, as well as these hooded monsters that can be encountered. These will serve as the game's toughest enemies. While they are very slow moving, these beasts can take a lot of damage, and are best off just being avoided if that's an option. Outside of just aiming and shooting, we see gyro controls used in how we reload our gun. When out of bullets, a symbol matching our gun's chamber will appear on screen. Players need to tilt their phone and align the symbol to the missing bullets in order to reload. Failure to do this correctly results in less bullets being reloaded. and I really like just how involved this gameplay system is. It's by far the most intricate and fun gameplay style we have seen for a Silent Hill mobile game, which isn't saying much, but still. Now, what kind of horrifying locations will we be facing these creatures in? We explore some very run-of-the-mill Silent Hill type locations. We see Brookhaven Hospital, as well as an otherworld version of it. There is also what looks to be the mall from Silent Hill 3, along with a separate otherworld rendition. We even see a version of the sewers from Silent Hill 1, which makes the levels overall feel like a Silent Hill best of recap. The gameplay itself will never change depending on what stage you are on. You will always just be searching for a key to unlock the exit, but environmental layout and enemy variety does change and get progressively harder. Now, the final thing I haven't mentioned is perhaps the biggest part of any Silent Hill game, that being the game's narrative. And well, there isn't one. We simply play as an unnamed character who has no memory of why they are trapped in this maze, and there isn't any additional narrative delivered to the player throughout the game, aside from some brief text between stages, which mostly amounts to our protagonist questioning where the exit is. However, if players manage to conquer all 10 stages and escape, they will actually get an ending. Finally making a break for it, we are met with a cold, icy, frozen version of Silent Hill, which seems very reminiscent of how the town is portrayed in Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which wouldn't actually release for another year. We briefly walk through the town's road, and we come face to face with a UFO and 2 grey aliens. In what is obviously a nod to the UFO ending from a lot of the main games, these aliens don't take too kindly to our presence, as they abduct our protagonist, which the game ends without us knowing what happened to him. Additionally, after one successful playthrough is complete, the player can replay the game as one of the aliens and unlock a new ending, which sees us find Mira the dog, originally from the Silent Hill 2 dog ending. Now, a final playthrough can be done as Mira, which sees us find Robbie the Rabbit, the iconic series mascot. He congratulates us on beating everything in the game, which results in Robbie ending our time with this game, using a fade to black. Silent Hill The Escape is easily the most fun mobile game released for the Silent Hill series, but that is simply because it prioritized being a fun mobile game rather than a good Silent Hill game. I mean, as a Silent Hill game, it's woeful. And I know that the prior games I looked at weren't exactly similar gameplay-wise to the main series, but those games at least had good narratives that fit thematically into the series. Here, like I discussed, there is no narrative at all. The only bit of story we get are cute little references with its endings. Visually, it appears as a best of sort of Silent Hill game, but with its non-existent narrative and its heavy action gameplay, it's not even close to being a Silent Hill game. If you change the enemy models and environments, this could be literally any other game. Despite these critiques, I do enjoy this game, and I think it's the most fun entry Konami has released on mobile for this series. To end off this video, we do have one final game category to look at. Now, you may be asking, what Silent Hill game has received a mobile port? Well, it's none other than Silent Hill Ascension. For those who fortunately don't know anything about Silent Hill Ascension, let me quickly catch you up. When the Silent Hill series was being revived back in October of 2022, one of the projects Konami announced was Silent Hill Ascension, an interactive TV series of sorts. It wasn't a game per se, but it did also have player interaction. It was essentially a Silent Hill choice-based game, but a TV show that would be streamed weekly. You could visit its dedicated website or download the mobile app in order to view each episode. Live viewers were able to vote on big events in the story using a currency called influence points. The choice most voted for would be chosen, and the story would proceed with these choices in mind. How do you go about earning influence points, you may wonder? Well, outside of the few free points available, viewers could use real money to buy points, and subsequently influence the story's outcome. Yeah, that is one of the worst decisions I've ever heard regarding a game. The story itself isn't particularly entertaining, despite viewers being able to directly change its outcome. Influence points aren't the only in-app purchases though, as there was also a battle pass available, because of course there was. This would net you influence points, and cosmetic options for your in-app avatar. Honestly, this TV show, game, whatever you want to call it, is a blatant cash grab. Every single part of it has monetization baked into it, and I think the decision to allow players to change the event of the story simply by using a lot of money is a joke. Fortunately for us, the mobile app no longer works, and has been removed from the App Store, and I doubt we will ever see anything similar to this again. That will conclude every single Silent Hill mobile game. Not a gigantic list by any means, but some of these games are pretty unknown by a large majority of the community, I'd say. So I hope I was able to shed some light on this interesting part of the franchise's history. I do wonder if during this current Silent Hill renaissance, if we will ever get to see another Silent Hill mobile game. And if we were to get one, honestly, I'd want something like Silent Hill Orphan, a made-for-mobile game with its own narrative that fits with the series overall. But knowing Konami, we could absolutely get a Silent Hill Ascension 2 somehow. If I were to pick my favourite game from this video, I would have to say Silent Hill Orphan takes the cake. It has a pretty good narrative that oozes Silent Hill essence, and it's an exclusive mobile game which I find pretty neat. However, I want to know what your favourite mobile game from this video was, and let me know down below if you have played any of these games yourselves, or are you just finding out about them now. I want to quickly close off this video by thanking everyone for all your support lately, and especially on the last Strange History video. I do have a lot of ideas in mind for more of these types of videos, so if that's something you want to see, let me know down below. However, I think that's all the time I have for you today, so I want to thank you so very much for watching this video, and I will hopefully see you on my next one. Peace.